And they're sick of it, but they know that they didn't get it quite right. And that always impressed me, of the precision and the integrity of the process. And the engineering, too, running that tape back and forth, back and forth. And it's a real relief when it's finally time to go home.
And often that's, 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning?
Oh, yes. You make that. I don't think we ever had a leisurely trip to the airport. I think it was always a dash to the airport after we had finally done a mix down that we thought would work, at least to be able to take something back and listen to in the office and get the impression of everybody. And there usually were some more remixes after that. Some things didn't work out exactly the way you thought they would. Some things worked out better than you thought they would. And then the package would be further developed from that point.
So it's not exactly a drive-through window kind of thing.
Not if you want to do it right. And I guess it depends on how involved you want to be. And I always felt that the more that the singers and the engineers and everybody understood what I was trying to accomplish on the air and what I was looking for, the better they would be able to complete the process. I had very rigid standards, and it was exciting to work with other people who had very rigid standards. And that then makes the process much longer. But you come out with a wonderful product.
Now, the way jingles were used on the station, how strictly formatted was the use of the jingles versus what was left up to the discretion of the jock? I mean, you didn't, maybe with the exception of the top of the hour, program specific jingles at certain points, or did you?
Oh, yes, we did. And that, frankly, was something that I got from Rick Sklar. Rick had tied the jingles to specific points in the clock, to specific songs, and he went so far to even record the jingles on the end of the songs when they put the songs on cart. I didn't go that far, but I, too, tied the jingles to certain stop sets, tied the jingles to certain categories of songs, and formatted the jingles very precisely throughout the hour to accomplish the message that I was getting across. The jingles were a very important strategic tool in what we were trying to accomplish.
Well, many people comment on the fact that the WLS jingle packages were always large packages. I mean, we'd do 30, 35 cuts sometimes. And what was your thinking as far as having so many different jingles on the air?
I used them very heavily, so I was concerned about burning them out. So I wouldn't leave that package on for the whole year. I would introduce parts of the package throughout the year until we were getting close to do the next package again. So I would hold some back and ration them so that the station would remain fresh as it could be with the heavy rotation these jingles were on. I mean, these jingles, I used a lot of them, and not only did we walk away with maybe 35 cuts, but we would do so many edits of those, I'd end up with 60 or 70 variations of these jingles. But that helped keep the product fresh on the air.
And as I recall from listening, you wouldn't just come back from Dallas and dump the whole new package on the air in day one. You would kind of cycle them in just as you would cycle new music in through the weeks and years.
But I never wanted to abruptly change the radio station. So you're right. We would take these jingles and we'd start putting them in over a period of weeks. They'd work their way in. It would be a constant freshening of the product on the air.
Can you recall the jock lineup around that time?
When I got to WLS, we had Fred Winston in the morning, we had J.J. Jeffrey midday, we had Bob Surratt in the afternoon, John Landecker was doing evenings, Steve King was doing late night, and Yvonne Daniels was doing overnight.
Of course, later on, Larry Lujack.
When we finally beat CFL in 76, Freddie was going through a period in his life where he disappeared on us one day. It was a great story. And we tracked him down in Philadelphia, and it was tough being there. I mean, it was tough doing the morning show, and Freddie just got burned out. And that gave us the opportunity to bring Larry Lujack over from WCFL to do mornings, and it was a move that was right for the radio station at the time. And Larry sounded terrific. And then JJ left, and then Tommy Edwards was put on midday. And then the lineup stayed pretty stable for quite a while. I think the next change was when Steve King left and Jeff Davis went on the air late night. And then Bob Surratt left to go into television, and Landecker moved down to do afternoon drive. And then Brant Miller came on to do evenings. The jock lineup remained very stable throughout the years. There were not a lot of changes.
Well, people are always curious, I think, when you're working with talent, super jocks, to use Larry Lujak's phrase, whether it's hard to give direction to a Larry Lujak or a Landecker or people who have these enormous audiences. And did you have any trouble in that respect?
The real pros are the easiest to direct because they know what the business is about. And Larry in particular was probably one of the best, if not the best personality I ever worked with, because Larry's attitude was, you're the boss, you tell me what to do, and I'll do it to the best of my ability. And if I don't agree with you, I'll tell you about it. But if you still want me to do it, it's your radio station, and I'll do it to the best of my ability. And I really appreciated that attitude and that professionalism that Larry had. But I think all the talent had that at WLS. Also, I think if I look back at the differences between WLS and WCFL, and I think one of the biggest was that I tried to structure the shows around the strengths of my air talent. Every show was different. I mean, there were basic formatics that didn't change, but I allowed each jock to do something different, and I tried to adjust the show and the format to take advantage of their strengths, where WCFL was much more rigid and the formatics were much tighter, and everybody had to fit into the station rather than the station fitting around them. And I think that was probably one of the biggest differences between the two of us.
Do you think that concept can still work today? Because in most markets, it seems that the station is trying to be very homogeneous, and the jocks are, aside from the morning show, are very interchangeable. What they've been allowed to say is usually reduced to a 3x5 card. And
well, if you have disc jockeys, that's fine. But if you have personalities, why waste your money on them if you're not going to take advantage of their strengths? You're wasting them. You're wasting a resource. Each show on the radio station is different, and it's been structured around the strength of that air personality, and that air personality has input in the way their shows should sound.
We talked in the very beginning about when you first came to LS and, realizing that this was WLS and what that meant and so forth. Well, while you were there, especially because of the clear channel signal and the fact that at night it could be heard over most of North America and so forth, did you ever have a sense that you were really influencing a lot of people with everything you did on the radio station?
I didn't think of it too often, except when a jock would call from a smaller market somewhere out in the middle of nowhere and send a tape and let me and the people at the station know how much WLS had meant to them. And so over the years, I think I appreciated, maybe more after the fact, the power that we had when I run into people, and today still, I run into people and they say, I grew up in a little town in Alabama or in North Dakota or wherever, and WLS was the station that influenced me musically and influenced what I do on the air. I mean, Paul Schaefer grew up in Canada listening to WLS, and he's mentioned that a number of times. And that's a big thrill, realizing the station, they felt that the station was that exciting and that interesting to tune in and give us their time. But it had an incredible signal at night. We did a survey. We had in Chicago a 3.5 million cume, which is unheard of today. Nationwide, we did an Arbitron study nationwide where we went into all the diaries in every county in the United States, and we found that the station had a cume of over 5 million.
Can a station do that these days? Is that era over with?
I think it's over with. The clear channels are being crowded out. There isn't music on AM anymore, which is unfortunate because people don't have the ability to hear what's going on in other parts of the country, hear what music is being played, hear what the personalities have to say. There were great personalities on the radio. Now you're limited to just hearing the personalities in your market. But for the same reason, network television will never have the shares that they had, that kind of radio and the impact that those stations had. It's probably not possible to duplicate that anymore. We just have too much fragmentation in all of our media.
Well, we were very happy to have been part of it 5 seconds at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And I thank you very much for your time here.
You bet. Thanks, John.
Well, that's how our 1993 conversation ended, but today's conversation is still going strong. This is John Wolfert. We're talking with John Guerin here on Rewound Radio today. And I got to tell you, I've got such great memories of listening to WLS at night. I used to have a car radio push button set to 890 because it would come in almost like a local station most nights. And just driving around town here or even in the parking lot right in front of Jam and hearing the jingles we had made in that building right in front of me come back from Chicago through the radio. And it always sounded so great, and it was so much fun.
But, it was important that you, and that's one of the things that I think you brought to the table every time, is you knew what the station sounded like, because you could hear it at night, and you were hearing how we were using the jingles, so you knew what I needed. You could take, again, now the idea that I had and turn it into something very usable for me.
Well, I also remember usually before we would do each year's package, I'd come visit you in Chicago. I remember clearly sitting in your office, trying to take notes on my pad, and on your desk you always had a jar of cookies or candy or something. And about every 5 minutes, somebody who was walking past your door would come in, grab a cookie, say, "Hi, John," and leave. And I thought, well, this is a good open door policy. Share the cookies. That was good.
It was a good way to get people to come in, stop by, and have those moment conversations that oftentimes are very important.
Well, it worked. Earlier on, you mentioned the name Marty Greenberg, who was, I guess, your first general manager at WLS?
He had to make the final decision that he wanted me at WLS, and he just said he built a wonderful atmosphere to not only for me to work, but for everybody else to work there and bring out the most from us.
Do you remember the thing that you had us make for his farewell party?
I don't remember that. What was that?
Well, you had sent us new lyrics to the old song, "Good Night, Sweetheart, Good Night."
Oh, okay.
And we recorded that, and I guess you played it at his farewell party.
Yeah, I need to hear that. I'd love to send it to his wife.
Well, perhaps we can play just a little bit of that right now.
Goodbye, Marty, where you're going to go. Goodbye, Marty, where you're going to go. You're going to leave us, and so we must say goodbye, Greenberg, goodbye. Well, it's almost 6 years since you came here. Marty, that time has been fine. You've been an inspiration, a cause for celebration, as the head of the big 89. Well, it's time for you to move on. Marty, we have to say so long. We're sad to see you going, although we're knowing your spirit will always, always stay on.
That was an edited version of the song, just to give everybody an idea what we did. We actually did the full 3.5-minute song for you, which was a lot of fun. But let me ask you this. Did you have any kind of emotional reaction when it became obvious that music no longer had a future on WLS AM? Because WLS hung in there longer than most AM music stations. WABC flipped to talk in 1982, and LS hung in there until, 1989? How appropriate.
Yeah, but I could see the writing on the wall, and I knew when WCFL went out of the format and we beat them, which was I think in '76. That kept people on the AM band, and I knew that as much as we were excited about knocking them out of the format, I knew that now that I would have to be competing with the whole FM band. Instead of one station and everybody was, two stations battling it out, getting bloody, it was going to be the whole FM band, and it was going to be a much more difficult battle because each station, the FM station, would take a different approach and try and nibble at us. And so I knew that was going to be an issue going down the road. We kept the AM going very, very well. But the company, at a point in time, we did a pitch to ABC Corporate to take over the FM station, the AM management team, because I was general manager then. And we did a proposal that we needed to take over the FM station, which was they were doing a variety of things, and to start to move the WLS music programming and jocks over to the FM station. And so they said yes, and so we started with Larry Lujak in the morning simulcasting him on AM and FM. Brant Miller was on at night, Dan Landecker had gone to afternoon drive. And so, in the music format areas where music was important other than mornings, we started simulcasting to move those people over to the FM station, WLS FM. And then the big change came when we had Steve and Gary, and they were on the FM station. And the thinking again was, all right, we're making this transition. The FM station is going to be music. They were doing afternoon drive. John went to go to Canada. We moved Steve and Gary to the afternoons in the AM station, and that really started moving us away on the AM from music. And then the FM became the all-music station.
Yeah, and around that time is when we started doing different sounding jingles for the AM and the FM, but always using the WLS melody. Let me just demonstrate that while we're here. For example, on the AM, you would hear the traditional 7-voice group. And that sound made sense because that was the vocal sound that had been on WLS for many, many years. WLS, AM 89. But for the jingles that were only going to be aired on the FM, we used a 5-voice group, a little more energy, to give it a different sound. But no matter where you listened, you always heard the familiar WLS melody, the logo, which made a lot of sense because you were trying to create a familiar environment for people who might visit the FM after years of being used to the AM.
Right.
So you were at WLS from 1974, beginning as program director, and you eventually became general manager of the station, and you left in 1987, is that right?
Yeah, I think that was right. The years tend to run together, but yeah, the time was running out, and it was time to do something different, and I had worked for CBS, obviously, at CBS FM, and they had I reached out to a friend of mine, George Sossin, who was working there and head of the FM division, and I said, George, I think it's time to move on. Anything going on there? And he says, well, we have this station in Boston that's not doing well. And you've worked here before, and at CBS, it was tough to come in from the outside. They did, to their credit, they did a lot of promoting from within. And because I had been there before, it was easy for them to bring me in as general manager for Boston. And then we switched it to oldies, and in 6 months we were number one. It took off like a rocket. So
that was WODS, right?
Yeah, WODS, Oldies 103.
And from there, you decided to return to Chicago to take on the challenge of a relatively new format called Smooth Jazz at WNUA. What led you to take on that challenge?
I've always been a fixer because I went in, I was able to fix WLS, I fixed WODS. We did that, and so came to WNUA as general manager and sat down with the team there. People like Frank Cody, who was, the inventor of the format. But how do we change it and mold it to what will work in Chicago? And we were able to do that, and that worked very well. So that was the reason I came back, was the challenge. And my wife hated Boston. She was a Chicago woman, and her whole family was there, and that was very important for her to go back. And she also was, very good at what she did, which was media buying, and was happy to be back in Chicago doing what she loved.
And you like Chicago too at this point, don't you?
Oh, absolutely.
And so these days, right now, what's keeping you busy?
I have a foot in broadcast, and I have a foot in digital. I'm chairman of AccuRadio, which is a digital music company, kind of like Spotify and Pandora, based here out of Chicago. And we specialize in a lot of we have all the main channels that you expect to hear, but we really focus a lot on the long tail of music, and it's all curated channels. So it's, we've done the work for the listener, and we have a lot of choices for them to hear their favorite music in the way they like to hear it. And I'm involved with some radio stations in San Diego. We're part of an ownership group, and we have 4 radio stations there.
Well, Mr. Guerin, thank you so much for spending some time with us and talking about all of those great radio stations and those great stories. I know that there's a whole generation of people who grew up under the umbrella of WLS, not just in Chicago, but that station. We talked about being able to hear it here in Dallas. I mean, that station was heard in most of the United States at night, at least.
By the way, I have a story to tell you. You talk about the coverage of the station at night. I was in San Francisco doing monitoring for KGO. They'd invite our PDs in to listen to stations, around the country that they owned, ABC owned. And I was driving over the Golden Gate Bridge in my rent-a-car, just, going up and down the dial. And I checked 89, and WLS was booming in. And I heard Landecker do something he wasn't supposed to do. Surprise, surprise. And I called him when I got back, because this was before cell phones. I get back to the hotel and I called him, and I think I scared the bejesus out of him that he knew I could hear him in San Francisco.
That's great. Well, there's a whole lot of people, most of whom you'll never meet or hear from, who grew up listening to WLS or got into the radio business because it was so cool to hear WLS, and you have directly and indirectly influenced a lot of folks.
Well, thank you. It was a lot of fun. It was a wonderful period of time to be in radio at WLS.
You are so right. Well, keep in touch.
Absolutely. Thanks, John.
All right. Thanks for doing this. I appreciate it.
Okay. You bet.